And we are back with a brand new edition of the Book Bazaar with the theme being wildlife. Before Facebook cut us off, I was telling you that the theme this year of of World Wildlife Day, and something that resonates so closely with all of us, is forests and livelihoods sustaining people and the planet. It is a way to highlight the central role of forests, forest species, and ecosystem services in sustaining the livelihoods of hundreds of millions of people globally, and particularly of indigenous and local communities with historic ties to forested and forest adjacent areas. Really, such a wonderful theme. And we have a clutch of books, and these are the books that we've picked today, not, just books that feature animals, but books on wildlife. And, even a few wonderful ones that have been put together, and illustrated by indigenous artists who live so closely in communion with nature. I'm going to begin with my first recommendation for the day, and thank you for bearing with us, about this glitch. I hope we're going to be able to sort it out, but every week Facebook seems to log us out as soon as we begin with the bazaar. But, for our friends on Instagram and, Facebook and YouTube, thank you for waiting patiently, and not getting really wild about this hitch or glitch. I'm just going to check my mic. 1 second. Yeah, it is the. Yeah. So I begin with my first recommendation for the day. And this one is such a beautiful little book for our youngest readers, called Chacho in the Amazon. This is, published by Little Latitude, and it's really wonderful that our youngest readers, I mean, kids as young as, maybe a year old, children, or if you're reading out even to younger kids, this wonderful board book, a great way to introduce them to one of, our greatest wildlife reserves, the Amazon. Now, who is Chacho? Chacho is a little rabbit bear, and what does Chacho enjoy doing? He's a teeny tiny fellow, but he just loves to travel all over, going on extraordinary journeys, to beautiful places, in our planet. And in this book, he flies. What I really love about the book, which has been written and illustrated by Sarah Cowrie, is the fact that on a lovely red feather, he flies right into the Amazon. In fact, I love the rhyme in it. A bright red feather carries me to where it seems all live in trees. I mean, just look at the gorgeousness of these illustrations, and taking you deep into the forest to introduce you the, creatures great and small that share this planet with us. One more spread, which talks about some creatures who see the world upside down. I mean, who's seeing the world upside down here? Look at Chacho, look at the bear, and you can decide who is really seeing the world upside down. Such a gem of a book, this one, Chacho in the Amazon, published by Little Latitude. We'd recommend it for 1+ year olds. This one is priced at 500 rupees. All the books that we're talking about at the bazaar, and the ones that we're not going to be able to talk about, and there's such a huge collection of books on wildlife. My colleague Sujita is saying that we have over 110 books put up in the wildlife bazaar, and these are not just books on animals, books that focus on wildlife and on creatures great and small that share this planet with us. The thing is, all of these available at, discounted prices. You can use the coupon code that's put up on top of the website, and the usual spiel being that please click on the tab that says bazaar. Then there'll be a drop down menu. Wildlife will be one of those drop downs. Click on that to find the books that, interest you. So Chacho, and these books are up at a 10% discount if you use the voucher. So Chacho in the Amazon is the first one that we're starting off with. The next set of books, again, two lovely, lovely little books, slim little picture books from Katha. One called Tigers Forever, done by Ruskin Bond and David Stribling, and the other one called Polar Bear by Norbert Rosing. These fabulous books of photographs and illustrations that really beautifully take you right into the habitat of the tiger, in this case, right into the habitat of the tiger. You can see, that this one, the magnificent beauty of the tiger and its stripes, drinking water, and very, very little text on the pages. So, again, a book that really works for the youngest of readers. I know we have a lot of Montessori schools that come to us, looking for realistic books, books with photographs and maybe not that many elements of fantasy. These ones would fit the bill perfectly. And this one, authored by none other than Ruskin Bond and the naturalist, writer, photographer David by Katha, priced at 95 rupees. And we would really recommend it for the youngest of readers. Again, pretty much in the same vein, this one by Norbert Rosing, again, a conservationist, and you can see it begins with him talking about his trip to the icy wilds of Canada, and with him going on an expedition with his dogs. Really, such beautiful books with so little text. And Joanne Saldana saying, yes, this is a fabulous for Montessori primary. Indeed, we do get a lot of requests for very realistic books for the youngest of children in Montessori, and these ones perfectly fitting the bill. And of course, there's excitement and action when a polar bear suddenly comes upon, or they come upon a polar bear in the course of their expedition. You have seen this beautiful cover, but I'm not going to give away what happens in this brilliant book. We would recommend it really for 3+-year-olds, both of them. Tigers Forever, priced at 95, and Polar Bear 2, priced at 95 rupees. Our next recommendation for the day is a very, very favorite author who has not done picture books at all. In fact, the book that we're recommending is the first one that David Mckee, and I'm sure many, many of you have read David Mckee's books, really the well-known author and illustrator. Such a sweet story, this one called Toucan, Toucan, written and illustrated by David Mckee. And you can really see the quirky, wonderful illustrations that make this book such a treasure. What is the story of Toucan, Toucan? Well, there's this little bird, and, he's not sure, if he has a name. He has a very large beak and was black except for the whites of his eyes. All the other creatures making terrible fun of him, and he feels really unhappy and decides to go looking for his name. Of course, he climbs mountains, he crosses rivers, but finally comes to a hot, dusty city. Familiar story, anyone? Hot, dusty cities. And what happens in the hot, dusty city? Well, he gets a dreadful job. What else, really, when you come into the city? Such layers in the story, such an allegorical story in many, many ways. But for the youngest of readers, just a fun story about how a toucan gets its name. And of course, I'm not going to give it away. I'm really tempted to tell you how he is toucan, but you're going to have to read this charming, wonderful book, about a lovely bird by David Mckee, and really the first one that he's done, the first picture book that he's written and illustrated, published by Penguin Random House, and priced at 450 rupees. Our next set of recommendations today is from our Pratham Wildlife Pack. There are such wonderful books that Pratham has brought out, and we've put an entire pack together of 11 books across different levels. I'm going to pick and choose two, three of those books to talk to you about, but the entire pack has 11 books, and they're all, again, like I said, they're not books that feature animals in cartoon forms. They're all books that talk about animal traits, animal behavior, even if they are in fictionalized form. So the first one, which is a real favorite at Funky Rainbow, is Yamini Vijayan's Satya Watch Out. Well, it's the story of, illustrated by Vishnu M. Nair. It's the story of a boy who just can't stay still. How many of us know boys and girls exactly like this? What does Satya do? He runs, he jumps, he spins, he rolls, he falls. Everybody in his family, be it his amma or his appa or his akka or his tata, they can't believe that, here's a boy whose hands and legs just won't be still. And then, in the course of his, it's Sunday comes along in the course of the week, and it is Satya's favorite day. Why is it his favorite day? Because he heads off to the farm that day, and he works with his mother on the farm. The lovely thing is that, and I'm going to show you just one spread. You can see the ever moving Satya in these pages suddenly becoming like a hare, hopping like a hare and sprinting like a deer, crawling like a centipede and slithering like a snake. My gosh, what a lovely little story it is about a restless young boy, but in the story showing you the movements of so many animals that you can see in and around you. That's a level 2 book. And like I said, all of these books are put together in a pack. We only have limited packs. I know our science packs last week just sold out altogether. And, Sham's putting up the various books in the pack. You can see them coming up, as I'm talking. We just have limited packs. So those of you who want it, please order away immediately. The next book that we want to focus on, which is a level 3 book from Pratham, is this charming little story of Razia who learns to swim, written by Divya Panikar and illustrated by Lavanya Naidu. This is such a beautiful book about a little girl who's terrified of water, but who, wants to learn to swim. So does her mother. Her mother too, her ummachi absolutely wants her to learn to swim. And you can see they are making an attempt by stepping into the water. Who comes to the rescue? Who teaches Razia to learn how to swim? Happily for us, beautiful sea creatures like a baby octopus who jets by and who shows the little girl what it means to kick. What a lovely way to really introduce young readers to the beautiful creatures that live in the sea, and at the same time helping a little girl overcome her fear of swimming. There are such lovely animals, and really Lavanya Naidu's illustration, for instance, look at this beautiful picture of an eagle ray sort of soaring out of the water. Such a charming book. Meant we would, like I said, we recommend the level 3 books for children who are 6, maybe 7 plus, and this one priced at 50 rupees. But like I said, the only way the books are available is in the Pratham Wildlife Pack. Sunila Kulkarni Gupte saying, good morning, FR. Lovely to be with you this bright morning, and saying hello to friends, of course, which is what we absolutely love about the BUZZAAR, friends chit-chatting with each other. The third recommendation from the Pratham pack is a level 4 book, which I absolutely love, called Wildlife in a City Pond, written by that wonderful environmentalist, somebody who's done a lot of work in the space of conservation and the environment, Ashish Kothari. His name is really synonymous with wildlife, research, wildlife conservation, and, writing about wildlife in such a wonderful way. This one, illustrated by Sangeeta Kadur, is a lovely little book that tells you that your wildlife can is just, one glance away. We don't really need to get to the Amazon or to the forests of Ranthambore. We can go there if we are able to, but if we can't, you can simply just go to your local pond or your local river or your local park to find exciting wildlife around you. And this one really about a dry, about a pond that turns dry in a city. And then, how well he's written, saying that the first raindrops on the thirsty land gave off a lovely earthy smell, but they also did what no magician could do, turning the brown earth into an oasis of green and blue. Really, how such beautiful descriptors of just a little pond, in your neighborhood. And then, of course, how this little pond becomes the hub of so much flora and fauna that each one of us can observe and look at whenever we want to. And of course, Ashish Kothari, being Ashish Kothari, a lovely message of conservation about saving your local water bodies, and to do your bit to save these local water bodies that are homes to so many creatures, so many creatures and so much biodiversity. This again part of our Pratham, pack. And this, of course, Padma Baliga saying true. And there's an amazing variety of birds in Bangalore. Absolutely. Just get out for a walk in the morning and, sitting on those electricity poles in and around, trees. So the more we conserve our heritage, the more we conserve, these trees, the more we preserve them, the chances of wildlife remaining right in our midst is such a reality. You say birds and wildflowers. Evidently, you're quite a walker, Padma Baliga. Thank you for joining us. This book, like I said, based on a real life experience that Ashish Kothari himself had. All these books and more, 11 books in all, part of our wonderful Pratham Wildlife Pack. And like I said, priced at 550 rupees, but available at a special discount of 10% if you use the coupon code that we have up on our website. Our next set of recommendations, I'm sure, is, these are such beautiful books on our shelves, a series of two of them, published by Katha. The first one called Walk the Rainforest with Nivupa, written by Aparajita Datta and Nima Manjrekar, and art by the incredibly talented Maya Ramaswamy. She really, really illustrates wildlife in all its natural glory so spectacularly. Look at the cover, look at the hornbill. Nivupa is a hornbill on the cover of the book. And what does the book do? Takes you right into one of our oldest ecosystems, which is the rainforest, which have, been around at least for 100 million years. And, as you walk in, and these are books that we recommend for 7+ year olds, but it depends, if your child's really interested in wildlife and nature, full of lovely bits and bites of information on the extraordinary creatures that you can see and hear in in the rainforest, whether it's the dung beetle, whether it's different kinds of butterflies, whether it's the tall trees. And look at Maya Ramaswamy's spectacular illustrations. I mean, really bringing the rainforest so close home for all of us. And Nivupa, of course, the protagonist of the book, the hornbill, who makes an appearance and takes you on a tour of the rainforest. This one, I mean, we've so far had paperback editions, but I hear that the publisher is not doing a paperback edition. The hardback edition priced marvelously at 150 rupees. We have the pair book with it, which takes you walking into the grasslands. And this time you are walking into the grasslands with Takuri, who's a pygmy hog. And what is she doing? She's taking you into the beautiful flatlands that are filled with tall grasses, wide, vast stretches, and this big green sweep again, illustrated by Maya Ramaswamy. This book has been written by Nima Manjrekar and Nandita Hazarika, really full of jaw-dropping, images and jaw-dropping facts about riverines and these riverine grasslands that India is abundantly filled with. And really look at this spectacular spread. So you're meeting on these pages the lumbering rhino, the leaping florican, the climbing frog, the bear who loves to eat termites. My gosh, what a treasure trove this book really is. Again, this one priced at 195 rupees. And like I said, we'd recommend this as a pair, for 7+ year olds. Our next set of recommendations is again by award-winning filmmaker and conservationist Shekhar Dattatri. We all know Shekhar as the person who has taken India's wildlife, along with Romulus Whittaker, right up to National Geographic. I mean, he has features and films that he's done on Nat Geo, and such a well-known conservationist, doing these two excellent books based in Orissa. Ira, the Little Dolphin, that this, again, a photographic book meant for young readers. Look at that splendid picture of the Chilka Lake, and, its beauty at sunrise. So, Ira, the dolphin, is, of course, a river water dolphin. She is the Airavadi dolphin. And what about these dolphins? How do they live? In fact, some lovely little nuggets, that are put into the book, into this beautiful photographic book, photographs taken by Shekhar Dattatri himself, about how a group of dolphins is called a pod. Well, not just the iPods. These are the pods that we want our kids to be, interested in, well and truly. And again, a book, like Joanne Saldana said, that would work wonderfully well for Montessori schools that want realistic pictures, and lovely text accompanying it. So this is, the book was written when he was filming on the Chilka Lake, the story of Ira, the Little Dolphin. We would recommend it for 4+ year olds, and it's priced at 150 rupees, published by Tulika. In the same vein, and meant for a slightly older age group, meant for 8+ year olds, that fascinating phenomenon called the olive Ridley turtle, again set in Orissa, and Shekhar Dattatri's unraveling. You can see in this book actual photographs of Shekhar himself, looking at observing the olive Ridley turtles. In fact, there's a lovely thing that he started to intern, and I mean, this is something that really needs to be said. Shekhar Dattatri started to intern at the Madras Crocodile Bank when he was just 13, under Romulus and Zai Whittaker. Not just iPods or AirPods, we need dolphin pod awareness. Indeed, Joanne Saldana, we need more of these dolphin pods over the other ones. Like I said, Shekhar Dattatri began volunteering at the Croc Bank at the age of 13. And look at what these influences do to you in life. I mean, he went on to become, and has gone on to become, such a well-known filmmaker and conservationist, and making wonderful documentaries on India's wildlife. So what of the olive Ridley turtles? The largest nesting site of the olive Ridley turtles in the entire world is in India. And I can't bear repeating that again. That means millions of olive ridley turtles swim and come to this lovely beach patch in Orissa. And that lovely beach, it's called Gahirmatha. If you can take your children there, I think the sight of the I mean, imagine hundreds and thousands of ridleys walking to find nesting sites on the beach at Gahirmatha. These beautiful, unique photographs actually shot on location, and you can really see gorgeous photographs that tell you the story of the olive ridley nesting. It's not without some tragedy, right? I mean, wherever human beings intervene, there's always some kind of tragic occurrence. And the trawling, the fishermen trawling in these seas, and not just the fishermen, big companies trawling in these seas, has taken away hundreds and thousands of ridleys who get caught in those nets. But a lot of conservationists working to ensure that this unique phenomenon remains with us for a long, long time to come. This book, 8+ year olds, and priced at 175 rupees. My next set of recommendations is, like I said, the wildlife, the theme of the 2021 World Wildlife Day, about indigenous people and the rights of indigenous people, the people who live in forests and forest adjacent areas, as the UN beautifully calls it, and the fact that they earn their livelihoods out of the forest, in recognition of the fact that being blessed to have seen porpoise pods in the backwaters in Cochin from home and from school. Indeed, blessed, that is for sure. So, like I said, depending on the forest for a livelihood, keepers of such wonderful secrets and treasures that forests hold in their midst. These, indigenous dwellers doing so much for our local wisdom, and the native wisdom that is, that understands patterns in nature, that understands animal behavior, and takes only as much as they need, not in a manner that sort of destroys natural cycles the way we have done it. So we did pick this time two wonderful books from Tara. May not be, one of them is a trickster tale, actually, not that much a wildlife story, but I just wanted you to see this glorious, fantastic book about the fastest animal in the forest, which is called the mouse deer, or the kanchil. What is this story about? Well, it's the story of the kanchil, and you can see these earthy, lovely illustrations. The book created by Nathan Kumar Scott and Jagdish Chitara. The stunning red and black illustrations, really, taking the story along in a wonderful way. So what is the trickster tale about? Well, the Kanchil believes he's the fastest creature of the forest, and challenges all the other animals to race him. Will someone come forward to accept the challenge, and will they be able to defeat him? Look at this beautiful Gujarati textile style that has been used to illustrate the pages. This style of illustration called the Mata Ni Pachedi style of textile painting. And it's believed to have been used for the very first time in a children's book, in this excellent book by Tara. And really, the reason we've included this in the bazaar is because the illustrations taking you deep into the forest, telling us an elegant and beautiful folk tale. Joanne saying, love Kanchil's cleverness, and all trickster tales never fail to delight children. Trickster tales, wagging of tails, and tales that never fail to delight children. This one, We'd recommend 4, 5+ year olds, even 6+ year olds, depending on the reading levels of your children. And this one priced at 375 rupees. In the same vein, and another book that really takes you into the heart of the forest is this lovely one called Where Has the Tiger Gone by Dhavat Singh Wike. And look at again, we need to, as adults, Joanne, correcting tales, TAILS to TALES. Well, we love tales of all kinds, don't we, at a Wildlife Bazaar. This one, like I said, the need for us adults to introduce children to the glory of rich indigenous illustrative styles. And Dhavat Singh Uike, who is a Gond, this is a traditional Gond story, which tells the tale of a tiger, basically, and illustrated with such rich symbolism. In fact, look at the cover. Look at the cover. What fantastic cut work right on the, die cut cover on the, showing the tiger as being caged. Even the back cover of the book, you can see a beautiful die cut that reveals the tiger, and tiger illustrated in this glorious Gond style. And it's such a, he's an artist from the Gond tribe of central India, and he begins his tale, which is, we recommend this one for 7+year-olds, really tiger memories from his life. He says there was a time when tigers and human beings lived close to each other. Such a compelling story, which at once shows you the interconnectedness, and that's exactly what that is exactly what the UN is talking about when it fixed this theme, the interconnectedness of human beings and nature and wildlife. We should pay a lot more attention to it than we are doing. And I'm delighted that we really have wonderful books that take the trouble to introduce our young readers to indigenous illustrative styles as well as indigenous voices. These must be in central India, we know that these very people live right in the heart of forests or in areas that surround the forest, and telling their stories of this iconic beast, which is probably very, very different from the way urban writers might tell their tales. Sunila Gupta saying, "Oh my God, what a speaking illustration the cover is." Indeed, it is. This one priced at 550 rupees. Focusing at the same time on, telling you a story and art and the environment. Padma Baliga saying, "That's an amazing cover." It indeed is an amazing book. I'd like to say hello, hi to, all our friends watching us. And I can see tons and tons of, people writing in both on Instagram and on Facebook. We're delighted that this theme has so much resonance amongst all of you. Anasuya Mishra, and I'm going to run through it. Anasuya Mishra, Bhavana Panjwani, Joanne Saldana, Haripriya Batula, Ramendra Kumar, Savi Karnel, Anita Venugopal, Shilpashri Ingali, Sheena John, Sunila Kulkarni Gupte, Kusha Tiwari, Payal Gupta, Amar Raja Sharma, Tanushri Singh. Big congratulations going out to you for being on the Publishing Next shortlist for Darkless. We are delighted when our books and our writers, win accolades and awards. Tanushri, of course, being a tireless champion of all things children's books. Congratulations again to you, Tanushri. Tara Veeraraghavan, Bhagirathi Panchal, Jagdish Makwana, Padma Baliga, what a pleasure. Pooja Giri Damerla, Vinita Vishwanathan, so delighted that an editor from Ekalavya has joined us today. Chaddi Buddy from school and from college, who worked in the space of ecology. I'm so glad that you're here at the bazaar this morning. Deepthi Maini, Mahua Basu, Apurva Ashok, what a pleasure, such a big supporter. I have to shout out, especially for Apurva Ashok. because we love the fact that they closely look at everything that we're putting out on social media, telling us whether we've made a mistake or not made a mistake. We appreciate that kind of support so much, Apurva, Ashok. It just means you're watching our backs. Thank you so much for being so close to Team Funky Rainbow and looking out for so many things for us. Great reader of books, great supporter, and working with Padma Baliga. So I know that the work that you're doing in libraries is just delightful. Vinita saying, likewise, Vidya, love being here. What a pleasure, really. Sirisha Pratik, Aparna Raman, hello to you. How lovely to see you at the bazaar. Harini Srinivasan, Aishwarya Lakshmi, Shubha Gupta, Anu Gumaraju from Tide. How, what a pleasure to have you here. We love collaborating with the Tide team to reach our books to spaces that we ourselves may not have been able to reach them to. Tide works with children from different kinds of schools, and we're so glad that their team curates books with us for their various programs. Anjani Rajgopal, the official play date. Cool. We are ready for the play date whenever you are, official play date. Tell us when, and we'll be there with a pile of books, of course. Ashine, Anjali Rao, The Bookshelf, Sneha, Tanya Gurung, Bharani Reddy, Aarti Mamta, what a pleasure to see you. Keep watching. We know there are special books that are going to make it, to our recommended reading lists. And I know Muttama sent you a sneak peek of the lists. And I know you guys are always looking for the sneak peeks of our book lists. So keep watching, definitely. Matthew Jacob, all the way from Dubai. Sanida Sifali, Manasa, Ummi, Rohan Subramaniam, such a birding nephew. I'm so thrilled that you're here at the Wildlife Bazaar. Pujita and Trisha Niyogi, very, very warm hello to all of you, or a wild hello to all of you. And thank you for being at our bazaar. I'll make a couple of more recommendations before we invite our guest of the day. And I know a lot of you waiting to hear her speak, because really the work that Sujata Padmanabhan has done and the fantastic books that she's written, making all of us doff our hats to the wonderful lady. Our next set of books, and because we can't keep poetry away from wildlife as well, this gem of a book by a conservationist and a naturalist writer whom we simply adore and admire at Funky Rainbow, Zai Whitaker, with her Boastful Centipede and Other Creatures in Verse. It's a slim little book priced at 150 rupees. We would recommend it for 8+ year olds, with lovely illustrations by Uma Krishnaswamy. This one revealing Zai's quirky humor in every turn of phrase on every page, really. She's talking about various insects and, introducing you to the habits of different insects, and like I said, look at the one that the blurb has chosen to focus on. Frogs' legs, boiled eggs. Stale fish, great dish. Termites, tasty bites. You've got to figure out why those termites make for tasty bites, or how they make for tasty bites, or who is getting bitten in the bargain. So there are scorpions and mongooses and crabs and centipedes and cobras, crackling with wit and full of fun facts in verse form. Zai Whitaker with The Boastful Centipede and Other Creatures in Verse, published by Penguin, priced at 150 rupees. And sure, the next one, which is also a book of poetry, and I'm afraid we just have a single copy of, one of the books dearest to our hearts in Funky Rainbow. And if you asked us to actually make a top 10 of the 8,000 plus books in our collection, M. Krishnan's Book of Beasts would definitely be on that top 10.
It is a must have in every home.
Mutama saying it's a must have in every home. I'm saying it's a must for anyone who's 8 or 80 or 808, whatever it may be, really. M. Krishnan, such a delightful naturalist writer, and his family, I mean, he's no more, but such wonderful writing on wildlife, on nature, on conservation. For many of you adults watching, do check out his books for adults. I think he has a clutch of them from Oxford University Press. Just beautiful writing about nature and a love for nature and the wilds. He's worked extensively with elephants and with so many other creatures in the wild. But what is this one that's meant for children? It's an A to Z rhyming bestiary. It is his granddaughter helped put the book together, and this glorious one, introducing you to the scientific facts, and quirky facts about different creatures, in an alphabetical order. It's really a most uncommon alphabet book, and such a great way to bring poetry and the wildlife together. And it's really, it begins with the aardvark with on A, and it takes you to the coyote on C, and really the dingo. Look at the choice of animals and the fantastic verse that M. Krishnan has penned on each one of them. He's definitely one of India's best known naturalists. We have ordered more copies of the book, but at the moment, just one in stock, which I will be surprised if Muttama sends anybody's way at all or not. This one, published by Duckbill, priced at 450 rupees. It's a real keeper, ladies and gentlemen. Sunila Kulkarni saying, M. Krishnan, he's just so fabulous. Indeed, he is. One clutch of books, that I'm going to recommend just before we introduce our guest for the day, and that is the wonderful Aarti Muttanna Singh and Mamta Naini's brand new set of books that arrived at our shelves last week. It's called the Eeks series, which introduces you to various insects that perhaps make you go eeks or perhaps make you go yay. Whatever it is, they are fascinating creatures. And so there's eeks. I saw an ant. And these books, Aarti and Mamta have written in collaboration with the Worldwide Fund for Nature. So you know that there's a lot of research in the books. Eeks, I saw an ant. Eeks, I saw a bee. Eeks, I saw a cockroach. And eeks, I saw a mosquito. Really fantastic books put together, that takes you into the world of these creatures. Look at it. And, Aarti Mamta specializing in getting kids to do little things on the pages of the books. So little activities tucked right into the pages. And this one taking you, telling you to meet the mosquito, telling you how mosquitoes live it up, and asking you to observe things closely. For instance, look at these pictures that really take you, that introduce you to the various parts. What makes a mosquito bite you the way it really does? Are there many kinds of species? What are their sizes? What are their diets? The books are full of such fascinating and exciting info. And like I said, because they love working activities into their writing, there are, to-do lists and lists that you can use when you go in insect spotting. It's a fabulous series, and, chock full of exciting things to read and to go out and observe and to do. So 4 books in the series, each one priced at 199 rupees, a real treasure trove into the insect world that you can perhaps just step out of your house, or maybe even in your house, sit down and observe. So the next time you see a cockroach in your house, grab Aarti and Mamta's book, Not the Broom, ladies and gentlemen. 199 rupees and available at special discounted prices. We are, of course, ready for our guest of the day. And before she joins us, I have to tell you, Sujata Padmanabhan, a wonderful writer on the environment, on nature and conservation, an award winning children's writer who we are absolutely delighted is going to join us at the bazaar today. She is an award winning writer, a children's writer with her book Bamboo. And I know many of you have picked up copies of Bamboo from Funky Rainbow. Her book Bamboo, which is based, which is set in Ladakh, winning the Hindu Young World Good Books Award in its first year in 2016 for Best Picture Book. I'm going to show you a picture of Bamboo, and that's when I had the pleasure and honor of meeting Sujata Padmanabhan, because she's so quiet usually and has so many wonderful books tucked away in to her credit, not just books that she has written, and there are several that she has authored, like Bamboo, Kari, which is Journeys Through Kutch. There's Something to Chew On. There's Ghosts of the Mountains, and I'm just whizzing past these books because Sujata will talk to them. I mean, will talk to us about them. And the most popular poop book about animal poop. Who'd think that someone so quiet and so really so quiet, and the first time I met her, she was just sitting very calmly and quietly, unlike me at any given point in time, that I couldn't help admire that that sort of grace, having these wonderful wild books to her credit. For all of you who don't know it, Sujata has been a member of the Kalpavriksha Environment Action Group for so many years, and we know that thanks to the various environment programs that she has run and that she has sort of worked closely with children in various communities, that the many wonderful books that have been coming out from Kalpavriksha, the result of all the wonderful and fascinating work that Sujata has done. She's also, a trained disability activist, and hence has this excellent book set in Ladakh called Chuskit Goes to School. The theme is not wildlife, of course, but you can see what a multi-talented, and special guest we have for you today. Let's welcome Sujata Padmanabhan and put our hands together for her. Yes, Sujata, thank you for joining Funky Rainbow at the bazaar. Before we, say hello to her, I want to tell our friends on Instagram that I'm afraid we can't stream the interview on Instagram. So please do log into our Facebook channel, the Funky Rainbow, or log into our YouTube channel, Funky Rainbow, to watch this splendid interview with Sujata Padmanabhan. Joanne Saldana saying, Bamboo is just so special, all heart, and the poop book is an absolute hit, flies off the shelf. Very warm welcome to you, Sujata Padmanabhan, with high praise coming your way from so many of our readers.
Well, thank you, Vidya. That was actually I think, a very kind and a very generous introduction. But I must say, I'm absolutely delighted to be here on this show. And of course, Funky Rainbow has always been a supporter of the books we brought out through Kalpavriksha. So many thanks for that.
We are, Sunila Kulkarni Gupta is saying Kari is gorgeous, and so is Chuskit. So many fans of yours out there, Sujata. And like I said, when we were speaking yesterday, we are just sending these books out to be discovered. And when people discover them, the Kalpavriksha books really, striking the right chord with readers of all age groups. So we will, of course, start off talking to you about, every children's book that you've written brims with the love for nature, wildlife, and the environment. Did this begin right from the time that you were really young, or was it your work that inspired this love for nature, Sujata?
Well, definitely it did start when I was young. I must say I was lucky to have grown up in Kerala and in a house which had a fairly large compound. So there was actually a lot of time initially just spent outdoors playing. I also had a friend across the road who had actually a wonderful compound with loads of trees. Um, but I do remember a time a little later, maybe I was about 9 or 10, when we spent a lot of time in the garden. My mother, my sister, and I, and we did loads of things. We of course planted, we repotted, we watered, we painted the pots, we grafted, we read about plants and things like that. So I think that's something, when I think back now, I didn't realize it then, but when I think back now, I think that's something I really enjoy, just being outdoors, working with mud and things like that. And when one was out in the garden, one came across, well, centipedes, millipedes, skinks, garden lizards, butterflies, snakes, of course. Uh, I also remember that we had a civet cat living in our loft that would sometimes remind us it's there at night. I also remember watching, absolutely fascinated one day from my bedroom window, just these ants, beaver ants, I think. They were, slowly coming onto one leaf so that it would slowly lower down and touch the other leaf, and then their nest making process began. So they were little things. But what happened in 77, once I finished my class 10, we did a family trip to Bharatpur in Rajasthan, and I think that's just simply opened my eyes to birds, which I actually had failed to see in Kerala, uh, just around my house, except for the very common ones. I mean, I failed to register other sounds which happened later, other calls. Uh, so there was this trip to Bharatpur, just the sheer diversity of birds, the sheer numbers, the sheer cacophony was amazing. And I think it kind of made an impression on me. But there was one incident. Subsequently, 2 years later, I had gone to Bangalore to do my, it used to be called pre-university PUC, 11th and 12th equivalent. And the campus had these two very huge rain trees adjacent. And I used to love just sitting outside and studying till breakfast time. And one morning, my eyes fell on a particular bird. And I was just bewitched. I just watched it. I didn't know what it was. It was this very slim white bird with very long tail feathers. I don't know how many of you uh, have had the opportunity to see it, but I didn't study that morning. I just like closed my books. Yeah, you can show the viewers the picture. Um, um, I mean, I just watched it and watched it, and it flitted from branch to branch in between the leaves with its these long tail feathers just following. I was just mesmerized. It was later than that an acquaintance of ours actually, when I spoke about this bird, he drew the entire bird and he said, if this is what it looked like, it's called the Paradise Flycatcher, and it's the male.
Yes, indeed.
That actually was the turning point for me in in an interest in birds. So I went across to the only shop in our town, bookshop, and I bought. I remember it was the Collins Field Guide, a small little field guide to the birds of the Indian subcontinent, and I just started watching birds, checking out on what they were. So initially, it was kind of just individually me walking around. I then moved to Chennai, where again we had a nice campus. Um, and I think slowly that the interest in birds definitely grew in Chennai. And by the time I moved to Delhi for my master's, I was definitely interested in pursuing this. And so in my early days in Delhi, this was 83, 84, I just kept asking around saying, is there a bird watching club here? And somebody turned around and said, yeah, there is a group called Kalpavriksha, maybe you can join them. So I did, but not realizing that I mean, they're not a bird watching club. Bird watching was one of the activities that they did regularly, but Kalpavriksha was actually a absolutely wonderful environment action group. And honestly, I came from a very protected background in South India. You know, in those days, we were just kind of inward looking. We never really exposed to issues. That kind of awareness was also not there. So Kalpavriksha actually, for me, just opened up so many different worlds. Just by, I mean, interacting with all, I mean, it was a group of college and school students, so interacting with them, attending events, listening to talks, listening to slideshows, etc. Whatever I could do.
Right.
So it definitely deepened, widened and deepened,
Lovely.
I would say. Yeah.
How very lovely. I can see, so many people commenting. Sridevi Sunil saying the poop book is an absolute gem. Nandita Dakuna, the poop book is just fabulous and Chuskit is so special. Rupa Baliga, big shout out going out to her, Sujata. She's been reviewing your book so extensively on different social media platforms, a great lover of nature. And when we had you as a guest, she, invited you as a guest, she got a special message saying, this one goes out to you, Rupa Baliga, for instilling this love of nature, both, between herself and her child. And she, of course, as soon as you put up the photograph, said, that's the Paradise Flycatcher. I say, atta girl, she got that right. And Sunila Kulkarni saying, lucky, lucky, waiting to see it, waiting to see the Paradise Flycatcher.
Yeah,
So,
you
of course,
can look out for it. I think Shunila should just look out for it.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
Sunila, and she has a lovely, little terrace garden. So there's every chance that one of them might just pop up right there. So of course, it's fantastic what you say, that that time that you spent, as a young child in the garden, looking and observing nature up close and personal, and subsequently building on that interest in so many ways. It's very clear from your picture books that most of them tell us such heartwarming stories of locale specific stories, whether it ranges from Kutch in Gujarat or to Ladakh in the Kashmir region. You have worked extensively in these places, haven't you, creating environmental education programs for children there. Why don't you tell us about the work that you did there?
Uh, yeah, I mean, my first foray into this kind of work was in 2000 when I moved from Delhi to Pune and actually associated with the work of Kalpavriksha. I had been a member throughout. And uh, the first program which I joined, but really at the tail end, was a program in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Colleagues of mine had been involved in the program. And just traveling with them over 6 weeks and listening to the discussions and things like that. I mean, I was just totally convinced for the need for this kind of education, localized, local specific education. And just to give you one example from the islands, and then I'd like to talk a little more about Ladakh because that's where I spent more time. Um, you know, even the knowledge that corals were living organisms was not there, and these corals would be blasted, and it would be used to actually make roads. So it was very obvious the people, all the mainlanders who went from India to were settled in the islands, had actually no understanding of island ecology of the place, no awareness, very little. And I mean, did we really need that tsunami, to bring this fact alive that we need the corals there as a defense? Um, and if I move on to my experiences in Ladakh, um, the I mean, I'll just explain a few situations that
Right.
prevailed at one point of time, which is if you look at the textbooks that children were using in the primary schools, like up to grade 5, these were written. I mean, they were based on the NCRT textbook produced by some private publishers, sometimes even by the state board. Um, but look at how irrelevant they were for the children there. And I'll just highlight this with a few examples. One of the lessons which said that, okay, this is the way you look after your, take care of your environment. Suggestions: switch off the fan when you leave the room. So fans in Ladakh, I mean, totally irrelevant.
Irrelevant, yeah.
If you looked at the wildlife that was described, it was always tigers and lions and peacocks, because it was the national bird. So no mention of snow leopards or the black-necked crane or the chukar or the ibex, or I mean, no mention of the plants, of course, nothing. Um, Balanced diet from the science books. I mean, would barley figure in that? No. The fruit would be banana. Now, bananas, you do get them in Leh or in Kargil, just the main towns, but they are transported in trucks across hundreds of kilometers, and only in the summer months, and then you pay a huge sum for it.
Right.
So what about sea buckthorn, which is a wild berry? I mean, it's high in vitamin C. What about apricots, which some of the villages grow apricots? So you get that every year. What about apples? The Ladakhi apples, absolutely no mention. So this kind of, I had the opportunity, I mean, the disability work took me to Ladakh initially, but I had the opportunity to actually work with an organization called SECMOL, and some of you may know of SECMOL's work, to work with a team to produce environment textbooks for grades 4 and 5 that were localized. And we actually looked at these issues and, brought in chapters that were totally relevant to the Ladakhi life, the situation. And these were things that children could relate to because that's what they saw around them. It was easier also for children in remote villages, who many of them were first generation learners, to actually learn without the burden of trying to understand something that was so alien to them. I'd like to show you a few images, and maybe we could just run through them quickly.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, we're just putting them up at the moment. Yeah.
So, this is just to show you how what the landscape is like. Some of you may have been to Ladakh, but there are actually children who just can't imagine or visualize a landscape that doesn't have mountains, or a landscape that is absolutely flat. We've actually had one child say, but then how does the sun rise if there are no mountains in Delhi? Next. This is just to give you a glimpse of how different the place is, not just geographically, but people, their lifestyles. This is some of the livelihoods, agriculture for many of the families, agriculture and livestock rearing. Of course, there are definitely new opportunities. I mean, I have 2 slides of tourism, which is, everybody knows, is booming. And just a glimpse of, I mean, these things would never find discussion in the classroom. For example, the 2 slides on the left are actually just ways in which people store things for winter months. They actually have to prepare in advance for the long winter months. So the slide on the top is really interesting because lots of families dig a deep pit and bury vegetables and cover it up. And during the winter months, they keep taking out vegetables, and it's a dry place, so it actually doesn't get spoiled. The tent below that you see is from eastern Ladakh. It's a nomadic group, the Changpas. It's an area that's so high up, so they depend entirely on pastoralism, and they move from one place to another at least 3 to 4 times a year. So would they ever find mention in a textbook? The other slide that you see on the dark one is actually a dry toilet required in Ladakh. Well, it's a cold desert country, so water is a very scarce resource, And finally, the waste material becomes manure, which is absolutely necessary again for agriculture to make the soil fertile. So there were many aspects which we brought into the textbooks. Next slide, we can move on. Of course, I had already mentioned the wildlife. So these are just some of the mammals that are found. There are 33 species. You can carry on. And birds. Some of them migratory, some of them resident, some of them local. There's a little bit of local migration that happens. Yeah, next. Yeah, and plants. So when we looked at actually, when we studied all the textbooks, we realized that Ladakh at that time, this is some years ago, had got a mention only in, I think a high school textbook. I think it was either class 9 or 11. I can't quite remember now. And the only mention was just 2 lines. And it said that it is a land without any vegetation. So, and there are over 700 species. Local people have a relationship. They know what's medicinal. The plant that this little child is carrying is rhubarb. Some of you may know rhubarb from an ointment, pain-killing ointment. There are wild edible greens that they collect during the season, and so on. Yeah.
So that, my God.
Just to add, sorry, Vidya, but we also realized that, just the right textbooks is also not enough, because where does the excitement and the fun and the passion for the outdoors and for wildlife come? It doesn't come from a textbook unless the teacher is also passionate and uses the textbook well. Otherwise, it can be associated with exams, and with a tough teacher, you will get punished if you don't know the answer and things like that. So if we can just go back to the last few slides, that's the environment education program that we also developed. This was in collaboration with the Snow Leopard Conservancy, just bringing alive a wild biodiversity through posters, through games, through all kinds of things, a number of activities and so on. And this kind of program is what we've taken. The last slide was from Kutch, and this kind of program is what we've done with differences in different areas. It's always a collaboration because we don't live in these areas. So it gets guided by the collaborating organization for exactly what they want. To what extent do they want our involvement?
So fascinating that is, really, right? To have these books that say that there is no wildlife, or there are no flora and fauna in that region, and you've just shown, so 33 species of animals, 310 species of birds, 700 species of trees and plants, really. So in fact, this leads me to our next question, where we just celebrated World Wildlife Day on 3rd March, and this year's theme is forests and livelihoods, sustaining people and the planet. And you have, as you just showed, that worked with children who live within or adjacent to forested areas, eco-sensitive zones around the country, including Adivasi children in Karnataka and disabled children in Ladakh. Tell us about why it is important to protect the rights of local communities who have historical ties to forested and forest adjacent areas, Sujata.
Vidya, Adivasis are actually our original inhabitants of our forests. They've been living there in these forests for generations. They've been living with wildlife around them. And many of our Adivasi communities are also entirely dependent on our forest resources for their livelihood, which is often really, it's basic livelihood needs, for their habitation needs as well. And they have very strong cultural links with the forest. Many of their religious practices are also linked to the forest. They're very knowledgeable also about the forest. So I would say that they really are the best managers of our forests. But we followed a Western model of conservation, which was exclusionary, which was kind of, creating these fortress-like situations. We declared certain areas as protected. We have sanctuaries and national parks. But the aim of basically these areas was to actually free these areas of human presence. And what would that mean? I mean, we have people living in these areas. So actually, it would mean that the ultimate goal would be to actually evict them, relocate them outside. Um, it was actually in the past really very easy to do, and there were loads of conflict situations, people being forced out of their lands, people not having a say in whether they wanted to move out or not. And if you think of it, the reality is even today we have like 4.3 million people who live within these protected areas.
Right.
And actually, we've also increased our protected area network over the years. I mean, it's currently in 2020, we had 870 protected areas. We had 67 way back in 88. So the area under the PA network has increased. But what about people's rights? What about people who live there? So what happened actually is in 2006, some of you may have heard of it, there was a legislation that was passed. This was because of the decades of protests by Adivasis, by forest-dwelling communities, advocates, organizations that advocated for their rights. We passed a legislation which is generally just called the Forest Rights Act in 2006. And this legislation actually recognizes people's rights, forest-dwelling communities' rights. And there are two kinds of rights that are recognized. They're individual rights and they're also community rights. And if you look at the legislation, actually, it requires that their consent has to be taken before any other kind of activity is allowed on their land. But with many other laws, I mean, we have complex situations on the ground. India is also very large and very diverse. So implementation of this law has had many, many challenges. It has also meant that some amount of control moves from the forest department to local communities. There have been weakening of some provisions of the law also. It's now a little easier to divert forest land for purposes like highways that go through these areas, or mining, railways, and so on. But I would.
Sorry.
Sorry.
No, I was going to point you to the book People and Wildlife, because you have told those stories there, right?
Yeah. So I would just like to mention, that besides the protected area network that you spoke about, we also have a number of areas in the country where local communities are doing their bit to conserve wildlife, or even to conserve the ecosystem around them, the habitat around them. And these communities are across India, and the reasons why they do this conservation is also many. Some of it could be cultural reasons, some of it could be traditional practices handed down, some of it could be a livelihood or an economic reason for conservation. For example, you might have a ban on fishing in a river by a community at a certain point of time. That's to ensure that their catch remains through the year. Or a whole landscape that is considered sacred, say a mountain, or even a particular species, like the soligas in BRT considered the champak tree sacred. So basically, the book you pointed out, what we try to do is to get stories for children on this kind of conservation. And it's an anthology which my colleague Tanya Majmudar and I, we edited. It's a collection of 10 stories from different parts of India. And it's also a mix of stories. There are some where there's even urban communities which are actively trying to conserve, say, the olive Ridley turtle in Chennai.
Mm-hmm.
And there are other stories where it's a sacred grove in Meghalaya that's being conserved, and so on. So we actually had a good time putting that together, and also for us it was an extension of some of the work that has been done in Kalpavriksha for decades on community conservation. The group has advocated, it's done a lot of documentation of CCAs across India and so on. So we actually had an opportunity to take some of this to children, some of the stories. I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds, and we've got 10 there.
Yeah, it's a lovely book inspired by true stories from across India. I can see Ramu saying, I spent some time with the Maasai people of East Africa. They treat nature with such empathy and respect. We have a lot to learn.
Yes.
So that actually, leads me to the question on Kalpavriksha itself, right? You work to bring out books that focus on environmental issues, and one of the things that stands out in all the children's books that you have brought out is the nuanced manner in which the ecological connectedness of things, be it wildlife, habitats, climate change, food security, all of them sort of interwoven and really showing the interconnectedness of nature. Why is it important to showcase that to our children?
Yeah, I think it's time. I mean, for us, we have to have nuanced messages. We don't want to put out simplistic messages, and I'll just illustrate that with just saying two things. For example, we often hear that people feel they've done their bit for the environment, and that's often linked to, oh, I carry my own cloth bag. I don't take a plastic bag from the shop. And while that's good, it's actually a very good gesture. That's not enough, you know. The world is just far too complex. The other thing is often cutting trees, cutting even a little bit of wood is seen as a crime, especially by urban people. I've seen that even in Pune. There are reactions when somebody really poor, a laborer, chops off a little wood because he has no access to cooking fuel, or he sits outside. I mean, he doesn't have shelter. Some of the watchmen do it sometimes, or people who are homeless do it. So I think because of this focus on saving our trees, which is a good thing. So I say that upfront. Saving every bit of greenery. There is also this. There is no understanding that it's a complex world where there are different needs of different people, and while people feel that okay, that's a bad thing, cutting off, chopping a wood because you see it directly with your eyes. I mean, what about all our lifestyles and the impact that we are having on forests? I mean, even the laptops and the various machines that we're using even for this event definitely is having an impact somewhere.
Correct.
So yes, we don't want to put out these very simplistic messages. And so if you actually look at Ghost of the Mountains, which was something that came out of the work that I did in Ladakh with the Snow Leopard Conservancy, it's a situation where a leopard has entered the livestock enclosure of a family and killed quite a few livestock at night. And this actually happens. This is not fictional. It actually has happened. There are instances like this. But we didn't want to portray a local community as, absolutely accepting it immediately. It is a huge loss for a family. If you lose one, we've seen in Ladakh, yeah, they accept it a little philosophically. But if you lose many, it is natural to feel anger. It is natural to want to kill. So that kind of conversation is there. That, somebody says, let's stone it. Somebody else said, let's throw poison meat.
Gosh.
And then, of course, I won't get into the whole story, but there is a protagonist who finally deals with the anger, and it takes a bit of dialogue and conversation for things to turn around for the snow leopard. Uh, so, uh, uh, so I think the dialogue has some of the nuances of actually how things play out on the ground. There's, of course, there's very different, but there's Khari, which you mentioned, which came out of our work in Kutch, Khari and Shero, both of them. With Khari, the request from the NGO was to actually have a book which takes children through the various ecosystems. And if you're familiar with Kutch, there's the thorn forest, there are the grasslands, there are marine areas, there is the salt desert, and there are wetlands. So there are 5 distinct ecosystems. So one of the things we decided to do was that with every ecosystem, we'll include the human being. We won't keep the human being out and just focus on the biotic and abiotic aspects. We'll also include the human being as one of the biotic aspects, and see how human beings in that ecosystem or habitat, what their relationship is or how they use the ecosystem. So that's a small nuance that we also brought out. And there's, of course, Shero also by my colleague Ashish, Shero to the rescue, which is a delightful book for children about this little hedgehog that figures out that something's going on in the grasslands, and kind of gets various animals together. So as children read this, there are different elements that come through about the habitat, about the wildlife, about the wildlife as well, but also the pressures on ecosystems. So there is somebody who comes in and wants to dig up the land in this grassland area. So it also brings out a threat, possible threat. But there are elements of fun. So it's not one of those, don't think children should end up feeling depressed reading books. Yeah.
I can see many people commenting, saying, Joanne's saying, such a learning for all of us listening to you, Sujata, Richard enhancing. I got my copy of People and Wildlife, love it, diverse and beautiful compilation. Aparna Naveen saying, it's amazing how you're engaging the entire ecosystem to preserve wildlife and nature. Sunila Kulkarni saying, I love the connectedness Sujata is bringing out. We learn and learn. Thank you. Kari's illustrations are gorgeous and the art is just wonderful. So much, so many fans of Kalpavriksha's lovely books out there, Sujata. But tell me, finally, for all the parents and teachers and many people watching, parents, teachers, and librarians, what can they do, to get their children to become wildlife lovers? And do books really help achieve this? Or would you much rather recommend that they spend time outside, rather than reading a book? What are your thoughts on this?
Honestly, initially spend time outside. I mean, I'm being honest. To parents, I would say, of course, it's so much easier if the parents themselves have had the love of being outdoors or the love of wildlife or whatever, and that sometimes transmits quite naturally to kids. But even if parents don't have that, what we've seen is very often children just, the turning point is often a wildlife camp or a trip that's been organized. Either the parents have done it. In my case, the Bharatpur trip just happened. None of us were actually bird watchers in my family. And a number of naturalists have actually been asked this question. And if you read their biographies or their answers, many of them will talk about experiences outdoors. And to parents, of course, there's also parents of very young children to not be overprotective when they're outside,
Good point.
or,
Yeah.
yeah, or to not be so scared of children playing in mud. You can just keep an eye that, just a basic eye, but just let them be. I mean, I think that really helps, because sometimes, fear gets transmitted to kids. I joined in at the last bit. I think there was that whole series about IE mosquitoes and things like that. I think those are the kinds of books we really need. Um, so yeah, to parents, I would say, yeah, take your kids as often as you can, and just find opportunities for them to be outside. I would say the same thing to teachers. If you can, just take your kids out, and especially if you work with children who don't have these opportunities, who are marginalized in some way or the other. I mean, when I worked with disabled children, actually children with multiple disabilities in Delhi, we did two wonderful trips, one to Corbett National Park and one to Rajaji Wildlife Sanctuary at that time. And for kids, it was the first time that they were traveling out, but for men, it was also the first time for many kids, it was the first time they were traveling out, but for all the kids, it was the first time they were actually going into a forest, sitting on an elephant. So, I mean, we did it with children with multiple disabilities, so we had to have actually a number of adults also to help out with everything. But it's important, and I remember we had a child who joined us in grade 5 from a government school, and in one of the classes, suddenly we realized that the child said, "I've never seen a spider. What's a spider?" So there was great excitement in the class, and all the tables were turned to see, could we find a spider? And we actually found a spider under one of the tables and carried it to the child so that the child could see it.
Nice.
So always to remember children who are marginalized. There was a child in Ladakh. We always kind of assured that children we worked with there would get one trip to go to the eastern part of Ladakh, where there are wetlands. And in after 2 years, we would always get feedback from the kids. And I still remember one child who wrote saying, "I never thought I would see the black-necked crane or go to because that's where they come." So a child who lives far away, Ladakh is a vast area.
Right.
The child never actually dreamt that she would have a chance to see that bird. So yeah, to teachers also, as many opportunities, and maybe if there is space and the school management allows it, is to actually also do a little bit of gardening. Many schools are doing it now, but to grow vegetables, to grow plants that attract butterflies, host plants that would attract butterflies. And younger kids actually just love working with mud. Younger kids love watching animals. You see that actually from a very young age till some kind of something stops them. Maybe it's fear or whatever stops them. But if you see children, very young children would actually be on the ground even watching an ant crawl with great fascination. So and to librarians, I would just say, yeah, I mean, stock up your books with everything that Vidya Money recommends. And I know librarians are also doing this. They are, in our time, it was just the job was to lock the books away, and keep stock. I was not so anymore. So it's really wonderful. Librarians are educators themselves, so organize maybe sessions with naturalists. There are a lot of naturalists who may not write, but their experiences are amazing, and they're very good just sharing their stories. I mean, we have just wonderful naturalists just look out for them and get them involved to even talk about their career. What do they do? Maybe it'll inspire some kids to get away from otherwise the usual mainstream focused careers.
I can see one child has just put in a comment which I want to share with you. Says, I'm Nishk, study in fourth grade at DLRC School, Pune, and we always have one trek every week, which I love to join. So there, absolutely,
I've been to your wonderful school. I've actually done a session there a few years ago, the
right.
DLRC. Yeah.
And be outdoors. It's a suggestion that many people have responded to very nicely. Joanne Saldana saying, be outdoors. Love that suggestion. Let kids be. Ramendra Kumar saying, I took my kids to a snake farm near Kenya. It made them realize what exquisitely beautiful creatures snakes really are. So, yes, I mean, I know, you had a clutch of books to talk about, but we're probably just almost out of time. Do you want to quickly, tell them about one or two books that you wanted to, mention in the course of this, last question?
So,
Yeah.
very, very, very briefly, do books make a difference? I think they could. For example, we have through Kalpavriksh published Portrix is 4 by Sharmila Dev, and I think that's a really lovely book which brings alive a certain creature to children. And there are many children who, when we've done sessions, they say that we didn't know that there was a creature like this. So, what are the tricks? I mean, one can read the book to figure out.
Right.
So, I think that's one thing that books can do. You allows children to learn about things. Uh, uh, I think Nandita is here, but I think Nandita's book is really one of my favorites. Nandita knows that. Yeah, do you
Sundarbag.
have a, yeah, the Sundarbag one, the miracle on Sundarbag Street. I just would like to say that we had feedback coming in from some storytellers about this book, and we ourselves did we released this online because of the pandemic last year, and we had 100 kids, and I just saw some wonderful reactions from kids where they said that, we want to do this kind of garden. I want to grow my plant. There were kids who during the Zoom session ran away and brought plants that they were actually tending at home. So it's a lovely little story, and because it's also based on something that's really inspired by something that's really happening in Mumbai. Uh, I think it kind of reached out to children to see, yeah, maybe this is something that I could do too. So, yeah.
Those were some,
So,
yeah, lovely recommendations. Yes, I mean, books always, making that connect even stronger. But yes, nothing quite like being outside. Thank you for, Joanne Saldana saying Sundarbag is one of her favorite books. And yes, Nandita is here watching as well.
yes, okay. I must add that Joanne also sent us some absolutely fabulous feedback about Nandita's book. And that really was encouraging for us. Yeah.
That was, yes, such a big little community out there waiting for these wonderful books. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Sujata. Really, your work, I said right at the beginning, makes us doff our hats to the work that you have done, and that that Kalpavriksh is doing in bringing our own ecological spaces and our own precious natural heritage to readers young and old. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
A
Thank you
big
so much,
shout
Vidya.
out
Thank
going
you.
out to you and to team Kalpavriksh.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. So that was, Joanne. I mean, Sujata Padmanabhan. I saw Joanne's comment and I said that was Joanne Saldana. But yes, Joanne Saldana saying, contributing so well, with her feedback on Nandita Dukuna's book. Ramendra Kumar saying, thanks, Sujata and Funky Rainbow for an amazing session. Joanne Saldana too saying, such a wonderful, eye-opening, thought-provoking session. Thank you, Sujata and Team FR. So of course, we will run past a clutch of more suggestions, a longer session than it normally is, but like I said, so much to say. Sujata had so much to share, and we were very, very happy to let her share the beauty of nature and the wild spaces in our country with all of us. I will go back to some more recommendations for you. I mean, as I said, there's like a whole clutch of books, 110 plus books for children of different ages on wildlife, and to our friends on Instagram who've come back to join us after the interview. We go back to a recommendation which, so much in keeping with the theme of, the World Wildlife Day this year, Indigenous people and the rights of people who live in forested areas or adjacent to forests, is this wonderful book from Tara called Speaking to an Elephant, written by Manish Chandi and Madhuri Ramesh, and illustrations by Matthew Frame. These are tales from the Kadars. They are indigenous dwellers, people who in a small community that lives in South India and lives in the forest. The wonderful tales of the forest that the Kadar elders have narrated, about living in an interconnected manner. This one in it with its stories holding fantastic lessons for people who are interested in our forests and interested in regrowing them. Of course, Tara being Tara, these textured dramatic illustrations which are actually woodcuts, just look at that, bring alive the world of animals and trees for readers. And I think this book works for readers 10 plus, but for all adults who are watching this show. It has a complementary book which is called Walking is a Way of Knowing in a Kadar Forest, again published by Tara. And we'd urge you to pick up these two books as a pair, because it simply just opens your eyes to how well indigenous communities actually live in communion with nature. This one is priced at 350 rupees, that is Speaking to an Elephant priced at 350 rupees, and Walking is a Way of Knowing priced also at 350 rupees, available at a special discounted price. No wildlife bazaar would be, should would be complete without a mention of this writer, who's got to be one of our top favorites at Funky Rainbow, called Ranjit Lal. I know there are many Ranjit Lal fans out there, and I've picked one of my favorite books of Ranjit, That Summer at Kalagar. It's a beautiful story meant for 10 plus year olds, published by Tulika, which is, the story of a young girl who loses her parents and has to go and, move in with her aunt and uncle and her cousins, and hills. It's one of Ranjit's early books with Tulika, and I'm so glad it remains in print. She is one coping with her own her own grief, and at the same time being teased by her cousins for being a little too fat. The protagonist Gitanjali is really furious, and the family then sets off together for a holiday in the jungles of Kalagar. I mean, Ranjit Lal, this is, him at his naturalist best. I mean, evoking the forest and the jungle so beautifully, and at the same time telling a story, sort of nature, the nature outside and nature inside, so beautifully intertwined in this book by Ranjit Lal, that it really rates as one of my favorite books that he has done. Like I said, meant for 10 plus year olds and priced at 195 rupees. There is another one, and I don't know if we have it up on the stream, but a more recent book that he wrote called Budgie, Bridge, and Big Gin. Again, a great recognition. We'd recommended for 10 plus year olds. A great read to show you that if you destroy your environment, it will also destroy you. So yes, it has a formidable set of protagonists, a 14-year-old Budgie, outspoken to a fault. Bridge, another teenager with a rocky past, and Big Jin, of course, bringing alive Ranjit's love for dogs, a Tibetan Mastiff and German Shepherd breed combined. And together, how do they deal with mean-spirited, bullies who are destroying the environment? Really a wonderful book from Ranjit Lal, again, a more recent one. We'd recommend it for 10, 11 plus year olds. This one published by HarperCollins and priced at 299 rupees. There are a clutch of other books, and I'm going to quickly kind of run through them because I feel there are a couple that you may be familiar with, but if you're not, look them up on our website. There's a lot of information on these books up there. There's the wonderful Tiger Boy by Mitali Perkins, an award winning book, being on many, many recommended lists. This one set in the Sundarbans, and its protagonist, Neil, whose parents want him to get a big scholarship and go to study in the city, but Neil doesn't want to leave his beloved Sundarbans. He wants to be there in the midst of its beautiful trees and its magnificent tigers. And of course, there's a mystery in there. There is a tiger cub that goes missing from the reserve, and there is an insidious human hand behind it, of course. What does Neil do? Does Neil manage to save the tiger and his cub? A great, fantastic story for, again, 10 plus year olds that really takes you racing through the Sundarbans, at the same time bringing alive the beauty of the landscape and telling a compelling tale. This one published by Duckbill, priced at 295 rupees. We can't, not recommend Supriya Sehgal's A Tigress Called Machli and our other true animal stories from India, published by Hachette. It's such a delightful book, that you can dip into whenever you feel like, because there are short little stories that are set in different wild places of India, and all, real true life stories. So, for instance, if there's a picture, if there's a story of a vegetarian crocodile, you've got to know where that vegetarian crocodile is from, or a temple of rats, the jackals of Kalo Dangar, and the real eponymous a tigress of the title, a tigress called Machli. Where does she live in? This one with charming little stories, cheerfully told stories from different wild places of India, and not necessarily just jungle wild places. Some of the stories are even set in in a place that could well just be your own backyard. So it takes you crisscrossing across the country and, telling you some marvelous animal tales, really the superstars of the, our animal kingdom, introduced to you through these fascinating stories. And we would recommend this again. Actually, we'd recommend it for all adults watching the show. It's a pleasurable read, and for young readers 10 years and above. This one priced at 299 rupees and published by Hachette. Deepak Dalal too deserves to be, has to be mentioned in a wildlife bazaar, because his books, pretty much one of the first ones that came out, that was set in wonderful, wild locales of India. So there's the Snow Leopard Adventure, which is, a set in Ladakh, of course. And then there's the Ladakh Adventure itself, which is, the Snow Leopard one features the snow leopard in Ladakh, and this one featuring, you can see the cover and you know which creature I'm talking about. In fact, this newly issued set from Penguin, really having beautiful covers that tell you exactly which creature the book and which landscape the book is set in. Here too, you journey to the roof of the world and meet the wild and wonderful creatures that inhabit it. There is the Lakshadweep Adventure that takes you deep down into the sea. And I love this cover. What a magnificent, bright blue, beautiful cover, reissuing the Vikram Aditya Adventures, Penguin reissuing the Vikram Aditya Adventures. And there's Ranthambore, of course, with the tiger. These were pretty much the first ones, and gripping mysteries. Two boys, Vikram and Aditya, and occasionally joined by another friend, giving young readers such a good sense of the locale in which they are set and the biodiversity of those locales. Really, Deepak Dalal, one of the earliest writers to do this for young readers in India. Were you saying something? Yeah, I personally love the Ranthambore Adventure, and I recommend that these ones are introduced to readers. If even maybe they're studying about these locations in school, or you're going to be traveling there, if at all, these would be great introductions to the biodiversity of that area. So yes, it would a bazaar would not be complete if we didn't recommend Deepak Dalal. We have this excellent book of nonfiction, again written by Vivek Menon, well known naturalist and conservationist. In fact, this book, The Secret Life of Indian Mammals, deriving from a marvelous book that he's written for adults, called Indian Mammals, a Field Guide, giving you everything that you want to know about amazing Indian mammals but didn't know whom to ask. I mean, what is a rhino horn made of? How do deers and langurs help each other in a forest? Why do, elephants and monkeys suffer when they are in captivity? Where can you see the Airavati dolphin? Which Indian mammal has arms 1.5 times the length of its legs? Gosh, Vivek Menon, brings alive the thrill of the wild in this excellent book that introduces Indian mammals. And there are fantastic photographs that accompany this, and really his love for the wild and his adventures in the wild coming alive in this book for young readers. And what's really exciting is that every animal and that he features, every mammal that he features, there are key pointers, there are identification pointers, so the next time you're in the wild, you're able to identify the animal or even some of its behavioral traits. This is a absolute must field guide for readers young and old, published by Hachette and priced at 399 rupees. We will just quickly show you the last couple of recommendations before we go into our new arrivals. Again, a bazaar that doesn't feature Jim Corbett would be so incomplete, really. And we do have for you some magnificent books. For instance, the Jim Corbett omnibus, published by Rupa. What a fantastic, and it's got an introduction to Corbett by none other than Ruskin Bond, taking you into the various stories that Corbett wrote with such an eye for detail, whether it's the man-eaters of Kumaon, the temple tiger and more man-eaters of Kumaon, the man-eating leopard of Rudraprayag. This one is such a treasure trove of tiger tales for readers 13 plus who are really interested in the wild. Monica Patankar saying, I have this book. It's such a good book to have and read and reread. This one priced at 295 rupees, and a great introduction to the fantastic stories of Jim Corbett. In the same vein, I mean, and I know we've introduced this several times to you, Tigers for Dinner by Ruskin Bond, which is Tall Tales by Jim Corbett's Kansama, or Jim Corbett's Cook, about the various adventures that Jim Corbett got up to in the jungles of Kumaon. 295 rupees. This one meant for much younger readers. But the real gem that we discovered fairly recently is Stephen Alter, another wonderful wild writer of wildlife stories, a writer who evokes beautiful, very powerfully evokes nature in his books. And I'm afraid we don't have his Secret Sanctuary, but it's a fantastic book for young readers. This one is a novel that he's written on Jim Corbett, about Jim Corbett, called In the Jungles of the Night. It's published by LF, so it's a handsome production. And it demystifies so beautifully that enigma called Jim Corbett and his unwavering commitment to the jungles and to the creatures that inhabit the jungles. It's such a beautiful book. Alter writing so evocatively about and in a fictionalized form about the life and times of Jim Corbett. We'd recommend this for readers 15 plus. For all you adults out there, grab the book. It really is a must read. This one priced at 499 rupees. quick introduction to some newer ones. This is Amitav Ghosh getting into writing in rhyme, writing the Jungle Nama set in the Sundarbans. And, this poem illustrated by Salman Tour, taking you into the Bon Bibi legend and about Dakhin Rai, the myth of Dakhin Rai. Ghosh writing in verse form, taking you right into the Sundarbans. This is Amitav Ghosh's first work of poetry, and we recommend this for everybody, for anyone who's 16 plus year old. Published by HarperCollins and priced at 699 rupees. Another recent arrival on our shelves, Neha Sinha's Wild and Willful Tales of 15 Iconic Indian Species, is a beautiful compilation that takes you right into deserts, mountains, rivers, plains, streams, and tells you stories about the wild citizens of our country. And no, I don't mean the politicians, or I don't mean the wild team at Funky Rainbow, but really taking you into 15 iconic species like the leopard, the phoenix of the desert, the cobra, the Asian elephant, dolphins, mugger crocodiles, 15 iconic species that are native to India, and telling us their stories. I mean, it's all about how, when we learn to live with these creatures, it's actually the fact that when we learn to live with these creatures is probably what's going to save us and keep us alive. It's, again, we'd recommend this for 16 plus year olds and all adults interested in wildlife. This one published, by HarperCollins and priced at 599 rupees. All available at discounted prices if you use the FR coupon when you're checking out of the website. And before I go to the new arrivals, there's no way I cannot tell you about this precious, spectacular tome that I'd say every library needs to have, The History of the World in 100 Animals by Simon Barnes. My God, it's an extraordinary story, and I've dipped into it in bits and pieces. It's meant for adults. It's telling you the story of 100 animals who've had the greatest impact on our world and the way we view them. Really look at this book. It's such a precious resource for any school, for any library, for any for any naturalist, budding naturalist especially. It's a great way to show us what our guest last week said, the interconnectedness of all disciplines. So this is addressing animals through history, the history of the world in 100 animals. It's a steal at 699 rupees. Believe me, it is an absolute steal and should make its way into every library, preferably in every little naturalist's home, if not at least in school libraries. So Muttama says, of course, she's going to pick it up and read it first. I've dipped into it in bits and pieces, reading about the animals that really interested me. And I thought it's just so interesting how he's connected, trace the history of these animals in our world. I know we're almost out of time. So our new arrivals, maybe I'll just show them up to you, because in any case, new arrivals are just books that have come into our shelves last week. So we'll quickly show them to you before we say bye-bye. And there it is. Fidget, the Wonder Dog by Patricia Ford and Rachel Saunders, about Fidget, who is not a fetch and carry kind of dog, but is more an adventure dog. It's a great story of bravery and daring do, which young readers will certainly enjoy and appreciate. This one published by Penguin Random House, priced at 399 rupees, telling the incredible story of a girl and her love for her dog, and the dog's love for the girl. And the dog, of course, is Fidget, the Wonder Dog. We have these little lovely books from Ladybird, and we really, we've never seen these ones on our shelves before. Very, very delighted to welcome them in. It says what to look for in spring, and what to look for in summer, what to look for in autumn, and what to look for in winter. Books that take you close into nature and the creatures that you can see in these seasons. Ladybird being Ladybird, I'm sure these the books will be lovely little treasures to keep in your library. Each one priced at 299 rupees. Our next new arrival is something that we've been waiting for most eagerly. Author Kavita Mandana's book on Abaka, the warrior queen from South India. This is part of Speaking Tigers, the Teenage Diary series, and this one delves into the teenage diary of Abaka, a fierce, a warrior queen from South India, but this one going into her teenage life and what how she learned to become an able administrator of her kingdom. This is exactly what I'm going to be reading this weekend, and for those of you who've loved the Teenage Diary series, this one is a worthy addition from a part of the country that many people are not really familiar with. This one priced at 299 rupees, and from Speaking Tiger. Finally, of course, a lovely young adult novel called Dragonfly Eyes by Chow Wen Suan. We really do want to. Padma Baliga is saying Abaka from Mangalore. Absolutely. All the more reason that it needs to come into your hands, Padma Baliga. Waiting to read the story of Abaka, and the Teenage Diary formats lending themselves so well to going into the inner lives of these queens and princesses. Our final recommendation, this, which is a young adult novel, much feted young adult novel that, in fact, it's won the Hans Christian Andersen Award. I mean, the author has won the Hans Christian Andersen Award for her other book, Bronze and Sunflower. But this one, crisscrossing between France and Shanghai and telling the story of a girl who inherits a beautiful ornament which has dragonfly eyes. I mean, it's a translation, and that's why we've put it into this. We've included it. We rarely get to read translations of literature in Padma Baliga saying, yes, I'm going to visit FR to pick up my copy, waiting for you. Thank you so much. So this one translated from, Mandarin into English, translated by Helen Wang. We've got to read it next week to see whether, to see what kind of story it is. Again, published by Penguin Random House and priced at 450 rupees. Before we say bye, we'll just say hi to a whole bunch of people who are watching us. Harsha Jain, Krishna Kumar Mohana Sundaram, Sohini Mitra, how lovely that you've joined us from Penguin. Nandita Jakuna, so delighted that Sujata introduced, focused on your book. All the books that Sujata spoke about in the bazaar, introduced during the bazaar, all up on our Wildlife Bazaar list as well. Sridevi Sunil, Monica Patankar, Arunji, Shilpa Srinivas, Manjunath VC, Johnson Nenki Gerald, Richa Sinha, what a pleasure that you're here. Just Telling My Tales, Kavita, Super Sam, Anasuya, Vinita Stories, Sakshi Bruta, Nandini Nair, Aparna Naveen, Kiruba Dinesh, and Aarti Chetri. Thank you so much for joining us at our Wildlife Bazaar today. Like I say, perhaps one of those bazaars with the maximum number of books from our collection. And mind you, these are not just books that feature animals and caricature, but real, books that take you right into the heart of nature, introducing you to creatures great and small that share the planet with us. We suggest you have a wild weekend browsing through our collection and picking up those books that suit your reading requirements. Joanne Saldana saying that was such a wonderful bazaar, learnt a lot. Thank you, Team FR. Thanks all of you. Have a wonderful weekend. Make sure it's a wild one. Bye bye.